There is inherently no separation between the physical and the metaphysical. The metaphysical is the sole information for the physical. It is the sole blueprint for anything physical. So whatever is attempting to be done physically must be accomplished metaphysically, whether conscious or unconscious. And any metaphysical manifestation, although not all metaphysical manifestations have a physical counterpart, all physical manifestations have a metaphysical counterpart. So to see alchemy as one or the other is only basically a question of focus. You can focus on the physical aspects of it, which involve physical chemistry, material substances, and these are no doubt used in the somatic material expression of transformation or transmutation, or any attempts to convert things. But we must go back into the metaphysical, because all things are sourced there, and the purpose for the physical, or the reason for the physical, comes from the metaphysical blueprint. So the metaphysics is an energetic field of various dimensions underlying manifestation as we know it. Alchemy takes place within two types of elements, the living and the non-living elements. The purpose of alchemy is to transform or transmute living substance into its more refined form. In order to explain this better, we have to understand that material nature, like minerals and metals and things, do not have their own, they have their makeup, but they do not have an inherent purpose or meaning outside of their own formation. Whereas living substance has a blueprint connected to it through its etheric field. And that living substance contains its potential. Now, the potential of a substance is reached through alchemy, which means through the alchemical process of transmutation. A living substance contains within itself its own greatest purpose, its own greatest potential, and can be brought to this through the process of alchemy. Throughout history, many different beings have attempted to convert things in the physical world to their highest form. The word quintessence, for example, is one of the words relative to this, which attempts to create the highest form of any given thing. Now, unfortunately, because of the world we live in the last 2,000 years especially has become highly materialized, most of the spiritual focus has tended to work itself out in the physical plane. And this whole question, for example, of, and alchemy, I suppose most people would associate alchemy with the words transmuting lead into gold. This is probably the most common understanding or use of this word. But this is more of a bastardization of the entire process of life itself, which is alchemical and has as its intended outcome a form of living gold. Let's call it that. If gold were a substance, alchemy actually involves taking gold and converting it into its living form, rather than taking lead and converting it into gold, which is more the attempt of greed and ambition in this material world to use spiritual powers to advance oneself and enrich oneself, which is, of course, not necessarily the purpose of spirit itself. It's here to manifest itself in higher and higher forms. Gold is, of course, a very noble substance and is beautiful to be used in adornment and for ritual and for sacred purposes. Monoatomic versions of gold are very healthy for the human body and even can advance evolution if taken in the right doses. So stepping away from gold, just using it as an example, the whole transformation of base metals into higher metals is actually, in my understanding and my belief, was born of the alchemists' attempts to convert living consciousness into its highest form. And because we are base metal, this physical body and our physical nature is considered the base metal. Let's call it the lead. Okay? And the attempts to convert lead into gold have been misconstrued, because my understanding is that this was meant entirely energetically. and entirely evolutionarily, and that the alchemists were not interested in creating huge piles of gold, but they were actually interested in creating a form of living gold out of a living structure. And we human beings belonging to the fourth kingdom have the capacity to, as I spoke before about the four kingdoms, there are 7 in total. You see, the 7 represents the journey. We are only 4/7 of the way in, just over halfway in this journey of life becoming able to express every single aspect of its nature inside matter. So just over halfway is pretty good, and we've done a lot with that. However, although the jumps between the four kingdoms are significant in the sense that they change, so the mineral is a huge jump, the plant kingdom is a huge jump from the mineral kingdom, and the animal kingdom is an even greater leap from the plant kingdom, and the human kingdom an even greater leap in appearance, form, capacity, potential from each other. We can see from the fourth kingdom onwards, life has reached a kind of minimum evolution point where from here on in, from the fourth kingdom onwards, changes, the evolutionary changes that cause the change to the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh kingdom are no longer required to be undertaken outside and externally. They take place now internally. You may understand the human being is a form of alchemical construct with this seventh kingdom, this highest potential already inbuilt latently into its mechanism, which is brought out through certain processes, most of them conscious. If not conscious, then time will bring these processes out eventually. But human consciousness, the magic of the fourth kingdom, is that we have access to the realm of, let's call it 5D, the realm of thought, and the realm of willpower, which is a divine masculine manifestation. All beings have that are fourth kingdom. This fourth kingdom power of will allows us to bring in energies and consciously force this evolution, like a tomato grower will let tomatoes grow in his garden, but if he brings them into a hothouse climate and he increases the moisture to the perfect degree and the food to the right degree and the lighting to just the right and the temperature, all these things are altered. Suddenly these tomatoes can produce giant, magnificent examples of the species that they represent. And we are no less. We human beings thrive under certain conditions, and under these certain conditions our latent evolutionary abilities begin to flower all by themselves. To use a beautiful analogy in this world of the 22nd century approaching, let's call it the 21st because we still pretend we're the 21st century, computing is very familiar to us. We have in our computer systems two aspects. We have hardware, which is the physical computer, the fans and the processors and the chips and the circuitry, and we have the software, which is the information using this hardware to run itself. Now, as we know from our technology, hardware reaches a certain point of evolution, then software reaches a certain point of evolution, and in order for the hardware to be able to match ever-evolving and more complex software, the hardware has to undergo evolutions, which means you have to discard that one and create a new one. Life is much, much more elegant and economic than this, because our hardware is self-evolving. This is one of the great beauties of living structures. Our hardware has in it a latent program, a latent blueprint for its highest transparency to light. And I say light in a metaphysical sense as an all-dimensional inclusive light, not just third-dimensional light spectrum, which we know from infrared to ultraviolet. The little bits of alchemy that came out and came out into the common world were again the conversion of lead into gold, but the purposes of alchemy outside of this particular thing were twofold, and that was to create longevity in the human being, so the attempts to live longer or to create the immortal, which the Philosopher's Stone is somewhat linked to. This fabled Philosopher's Stone was the substance so purportedly created or assembled in order to convey to the imbuer longevity. The other one is the eradication of all disease. So the alchemists were interested in eradicating all disease in life, in human life. And for this purpose, the alchemical explorations were the early researchers in that regard. And they were actually much closer to the source of that in those days and for hundreds of years than we have ever come today, even after 300 years of modern science. And the reason for that is quite simple. The eradication of disease is a very simple act, in fact, which the early alchemists understood, and that's why they were seeking for plant-based and mineral-based support systems to this process, because they knew that the eradication of disease or the maintenance of health in the human body had nothing to do exclusively with the use of minerals or potions or plant matter, but actually had to do with the maintenance and increase of the human vital forces, the pranic field, which in the East we call chi, in India it's called prana, in the early part of the 20th century. In Europe we had this word called orgone, which Wilhelm Reich created or invented this word to describe life force energy itself. So what is life force energy? This is the essence of alchemy itself in regards to longevity and the eradication of disease. This human body is, as I said before, just material in nature and not a cause of anything. It is merely an effect. Being an effect, what is the cause for the maintenance, for the evolution, just for the maintaining of life inside a human body? And this we have to look into the etheric fields, which are technically belonging to the physical world spectrum. We have in this physical world 3 base known densities of matter, which is solid, liquid, and gas. These are the 3 densities in which we find 3D matter divided into. But there is actually 4th density, which is etheric. Let's call it the etheric nature, which is even more refined than the gaseous state. Now, in fact, this etheric state is an intermediary between the physical world 3D and the 4th dimension, which we call the astral plane, which is essentially an energetic dimension of faster than light speeds, which is a vibratory dimension whose translation into the physical world through our physical bodies we experience as emotion. And our physical bodies have a perfected endocrine system, which has been perfected, by the way, in the last civilization of Atlantis, whether you believe it or not. And this was perfected there in order to give the human soul its capacity to broadcast its energetic field, which is emotive, into the physical body so we can feel emotions in our bloodstream. So our hormonal centers produce secretions which allow us to feel emotions in physicality. Quite a marvelous phenomenon, actually. So these physical fields, the energetic fields, are responsible for this. And the ethers are the bridge between the astral, energetic, superluminal dimension and the physical, light-based speed dimension, which is our physical body. The ethers are the bridge between these two. And the ethers form a kind of blueprint for our physical body. Things like Kirlian photography and other sort of unusual scientific means have managed to identify a certain auric field, let's call it an aura, for want of a better word, an auric field around the body. And the vital forces of the body extend about 1.5 to 2 centimeters, and they're silvery in nature. For example, if you want to watch them yourself, you won't see the silver nature, but you actually see the blur of life force in the field if you hold your hand up to the sunset, after the sun sets, or to the sunrise, before it rises itself in the sky. You hold your hand up to the sky and you slightly unfocus your eyes, and you move your hand, you will actually begin to see a dark shaped field around your hands, which is essentially the disturbance that your vital force is creating in the field of your vision. This extends around our whole body and is the blueprint for all health in the body. Every time your body receives an insult, a cut, for example. If I take a knife or by some accident I am cut by something, how does the body know exactly how to rebuild itself the way that it was before? And it's quite simple. It has nothing to do with the innate intelligence of the body, because that derives all of its information from the energetic etheric field, which is the blueprint for human health. Now, this blueprint for human health is like a blueprint. Like an architect builds a building, they build a blueprint first. And from that blueprint, the body is built. The physical building is built from that blueprint. The architects come in and all the workers look at the blueprint and reference it. And from that blueprint, they know what to build and exactly how to build it and how everything is supposed to relate to itself. Now, the human body itself has a blueprint which we call the etheric field. Now, when the etheric field is damaged, which can happen through physical trauma, as well as energetic trauma, EMFs, high sources of radiation, aberrant mental states, excessive emotional stress, and physical trauma, all things that disturb and impede the functionality of the etheric field. So, coming back to alchemy, the alchemists were actually striving to maintain and understand what causes a perfect etheric field. And there are certain plant substances that support this. The plant kingdom is a perfect source of healing properties for the physical body as well as for the etheric body. But remember, all healing takes place based on the etheric blueprint. So if the body is insulted, the machinations of the body, the instrumentality of the body and its infinite wonder references straight back to the blueprint, which is superimposed over the same area. And being still intact, the physical processes simply follow the processes of the blueprint and repair it as it was before, leaving perhaps a little bit of scar tissue in as much as the tissue itself cannot be, re-welded back into its original state. But that's the best that can happen. And when this state continues with a healthy etheric body, with a healthy etheric field, then illness is actually unknown. One of the great fallacies of our time is this thing with illness, and I would say our time, I say the last few thousand years of our civilizations all over the planet, is that health is actually a common state, and it's actually a natural state for human beings. Human beings are not supposed to become ill. There is actually no reason why human beings should become ill if they possess a fully functioning etheric field. And that etheric field hasn't been compromised. Unfortunately, since 100 years, we are coming to live in the most toxic civilization that has ever existed on this planet. And all these innumerable toxins, energetic, electromagnetic, chemical, in nature, pollutive mostly, are all insults to the integrity of the etheric field. And as a result, human health is at its all-time low. So for anybody seeking the perfect health through alchemy, understand that the early alchemists understood already that to hold the etheric field intact is to guarantee a life of perfect health. A life of perfect health is the legacy that every human being has. And it's only the great knowledge, you might say, is helping humanity to understand what they are doing to stuff it up. It's really that simple. The capacity to perform alchemy is nothing more than our capacity to embrace, understand, recognize, and utilize these workings of nature. And Hermetic magic from the white Western source is nothing more than the human will entrained to recognize these principles and interact with them and interface with them and become causal in their expression in the world. So let's use an example of alchemy in action, something that is often overlooked in our modern world, but I'd like to point out a particular worthy of our attention example to highlight the magic already happening in the second kingdom. Remember, we are fourth kingdom, and I'd like to say we are many times more sophisticated and complex and enriched and capable and potentialized than the second kingdom. But I just want to share something with you. Have a look at this flower. This is an extraordinary flower grown by a species of ginger. This is not an edible version. But as you can see here, the structure of it is almost hexagonal inside from the front. And yet it grows this extraordinary tower of things. Now, I'd like to, if I was a multi-billionaire, I'd like to offer a dare to the world's most powerful laboratories or factories or whatever parts of the world make incredible things. I would like to say, I'm going to give you a cup of dirt, a cup of mud. In my hand, here's a cup of mud. just mud. Take it from anywhere, scoop it up, a cup of mud. And I'm going to give you a glass of water. These are your two ingredients. And aside from the fact that there are multiple ingredients inside this cup of earth, but with these two ingredients, I challenge any lab on the planet to make even this color. Okay, let alone these multiple colors, let alone these hues, let alone these geometric shapes, let alone this texture, so soft, it's like velvet. And then the quintessence of this plant is its scent. It smells like the tropics, like frangipani, like a divine scented thing. And some tiny seed containing this DNA, as we call it, this tiny program of life, dropped into this medium, dropped into the earth with a little bit of water, will produce this. And I just like to highlight that in order to show how utterly unsophisticated human technology is. How utterly unadvanced our modern civilization is. We cannot even comprehend how the vegetable kingdom can produce this. How much then do you think the wonders lie in store for you hidden in your own nature? And alchemy is the secret of discovering these in progress. We are comprised of multiple dimensions. We human beings, being the fourth kingdom, we are both 3D, physical body, 4D, astral plane, which is the source of all our emotive fields, all our energetics of emotion, and 5D, which is the fifth dimension, even more superliminal than the 4D, even faster than light speeds than that, which is the source and realm of all thought, from which we take, when we tune in, the mind is like a tuning device, like a radio, like a beautiful radio with a huge dial in it. And when you dial a certain frequency, when you focus on a certain thing, when you focus your mind on an idea, you tune in to the universe's provision for that idea and all thoughts surrounding that idea. And so the geniuses on the planet who have given rise to most of our civilization and most of the advances in civilization were nothing more than human beings who tuned in through certain kinds of thought and could tune in to get very coherent waves of information back, which they then reproduced in word or thought or action or understanding to enrich and embolden our own civilization and our own progress. So